That's so funny. The fucking rock and roll music came on and shit. I love it. All right, whatever. Ah, damn, he gone already? The fuck? Let me play a little defense first, man. Come on, bro. Let's see. Holy shit. Damn. Who missed shots? The fuck? I'm trash. I can't play defense for sure though. Damn, almost went in. That's all. Dang. All right, I got to switch jump shots or switch dribbles. I don't like that dribble like that. Bro, stop fouling. I'm back. I'm unpatched. Too easy. Sheesh. Step to the left, you know what I'm saying? Shot creator shit. Damn, nigga. Stay in front of him, man. What the fuck? Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh. Hey. Dang, he tried to dunk on this shit. Hey. Dang. Damn. Switch chat large.
Let's keep it up.
Oh, that's no foul. Damn. Oh, can't even do the up shot, turn around jumper no more, huh? Maybe I was too low. Oh! What? No defense, short arms. Nah, I don't have short arms, but sure looked like it that time. I'm back though. Damn. Clamps. Just leave him in the corner. Damn. No hop jumper that time either, man. They patched me. Come on, bro. He tried to shoot it from full court or half court. Yeah, right.
with Jung, who helped me to remind myself that I was, by upbringing and by tradition, always a Westerner, and I couldn't escape from my own cultural conditioning, and that this inability to escape was not a kind of prison, but was the endowment of one's being with certain capacities like one's arms and legs and mouth and teeth and brain, which could always be used constructively. And I feel it's for this reason that I have always remained for myself in the position of the comparative philosopher, wanting to balance East and West rather than to go overboard with enthusiasm for exotic import. But there are aspects of Jung's work far beyond this that I want to discuss. And first of all, I want to call attention to one fundamental principle that underlay all his work and that was most extraordinarily exemplified in Jung himself as a person. And this is what I would call his recognition of the polarity of life. That is to say, his resistance to what is to my mind the disastrous and absurd hypothesis that there is in this universe a radical and absolute conflict between good and evil, light and darkness, that can never, never, never be harmonized. This conflict has come up to us in a very vivid way in recent days with the trial of Adolf Eichmann. And it's interesting too that certain people accused Jung also of Nazi sympathies, because he too would not subscribe to the absolute state of a war between good and evil, going down to the very roots of the universe. Obviously, when certain crimes and catastrophes occur, human emotions are deeply and rightly aroused. And I would, for myself, say that were I in any situation where an Eichmann was operating, I would be roused to a degree of fury that I can hardly imagine in my present existence, but I know it would come out from me. I would oppose those sorts of villainies with all the energy that I have, and if I was trapped in such a situation, I would fight it to the end. But at the same time, I would recognize the relativity of my own emotional involvement. I would know that I was fighting a man like Eichmann in the same way, shall we say, as a spider and a wasp, insects which naturally prey upon one another and fight one another, do so. But as a human being, I would not be able to regard my adversary as a metaphysical devil. That is to say, as one who represented the principle of absolute and unresolvable evil. And I think this is the most important thing in Jung, that he was able to point out that to the degree that you condemn others and find evil in others, you are to that degree unconscious of the same thing in yourself, or at least of the potentiality of it. There can be Eichmann and Hitlers and Himmlers just because there are people who are unconscious of their own dark sides, and they project that darkness outward into, say, Jews or communists or whatever the enemy may be, and say, there is the darkness, it is not in me, and therefore because the darkness is not in me, I am justified in annihilating this enemy whether it be with atom bombs or gas chambers or whatnot. But to the degree that a person becomes conscious that the evil is as much in himself as in the other, to this same degree he is not likely to project it onto some scapegoat and commit the most criminal acts of violence upon other people. Now this is to me the primary thing that Jung saw, that in order to admit and really accept and understand the evil in oneself, one had to be able to do it without being an enemy to it. As he put it, you had to accept your own dark side. And he had this preeminently in his own character. I had a long talk with him back in 1958, and I was enormously impressed with a man who was obviously very great, but at the same time with whom everyone could be completely at ease. There are so many great people, great in knowledge or great in what is called holiness, with whom the ordinary individual feels rather embarrassed. He feels inclined to sit on the edge of his chair and to feel immediately judged by this person's wisdom or sanctity. Jung managed to have wisdom, and I think also sanctity, in such a way that when other people came into its presence, they didn't feel judged. They felt enhanced, encouraged, and invited to share in a common life. And there was a sort of twinkle in Jung's eye. It gave me the impression that he knew himself to be as just as much a villain as everybody else. There's a nice German word, Hintergedanke, which means a thought in the very far, far back of your mind. Jung had a Hintergedanke in the back of his mind, which showed in the twinkle in his eye. It showed that he knew and recognized what I've sometimes called the element of irreducible rascality in himself. And he knew it so strongly and so clearly, and in a way so lovingly, that he would not condemn the same thing in others, and therefore would not be led into those thoughts, feelings, and acts of violence towards others, which are always characteristic of the people who project the devil in themselves upon the outside, upon somebody else, upon the scapegoat. Now this made Jung a very integrated character. In other words, I have to present a little bit of a complex idea. He was a man who was thoroughly with himself, having seen and accepted his own nature profoundly. He had a kind of unity and absence of conflict in his own nature, which had to it this additional complication that I find so fascinating. He was the sort of man who could feel anxious and afraid and guilty without being ashamed of feeling this way. In other words, he understood that an integrated person is not a person who simply eliminated the sense of guilt or the sense of anxiety from his life, who's fearless and wooden and kind of sage of stone. He's a person who feels all these things, but has no recrimination against himself for feeling them. And this is, to my mind, a profound kind of humor. In humor, there's always a certain element of malice. There was a talk given on the Pacifica stations just a little while ago, which was an interview with Al Capp. And Al Capp made the point that he felt that all humor was fundamentally malicious. Now, there's a very high kind of humor, which is humor at oneself. A real humor is not jokes at the expense of others. It's always jokes at the expense of oneself, and of course it has an element of malice in it. It has malice towards oneself, the recognition of the fact that behind the social role that you assume, behind all your pretension to being either a good citizen or a fine scholar or a great scientist or a leading politician or physician or whatever you happen to be, but behind this facade there is a certain element of the unreconstructed bum, not as something to be condemned and wailed over, but as something to be recognized as contributive to one's greatness and to one's positive aspect, in the same way that manure is contributive to the perfume of the rose. Jung saw this and Jung accepted this. And I want to read a passage from one of his lectures, which I think is one of the greatest things he ever wrote, and which has been a very marvelous thing for me. It was in a lecture delivered to a group of clergy in Switzerland a considerable number of years ago, and he writes as follows: "People forget that even doctors have moral scruples, and that certain patients' confessions are hard even for a doctor to swallow. Yet the patient does not feel himself accepted, unless the very worst in him is accepted too. No one can bring this about by mere words. It comes only through reflection, and through the doctor's attitude towards himself and his own dark side. If the doctor wants to guide another, or even accompany him a step of the way, he must feel with that person's psyche. He never feels it when he passes judgment. Whether he puts his judgments into words or keeps them to himself makes not the slightest difference. To take the opposite position and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use. Feeling comes only through unprejudiced objectivity. This sounds almost like a scientific precept, and it could be confused with a purely intellectual, abstract attitude of mind. But what I mean is something quite different. It is a human quality, a kind of deep respect for the facts, for the man who suffers from them, and for the riddle of such a man's life. The truly religious person has this attitude. He knows that God has brought all sorts of strange and inconceivable things to pass, and seeks in the most curious ways to enter a man's heart. He therefore senses in everything the unseen presence of the divine will. This is what I mean by unprejudiced objectivity. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor, who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. And I am the oppressor of the person I condemn, not his friend and fellow sufferer. I do not in the least mean to say that we must never pass judgment when we desire to help and improve. But if the doctor wishes to help a human being, he must be able to accept him as he is. And he can do this in reality only when he has already seen and accepted himself as he is. Perhaps this sounds very simple, but simple things are always the most difficult. In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple, and so acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the acid test of one's whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, yea, the very fiend himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved, what then? Then, as a rule, the whole truth of Christianity is reversed. There is then no more talk of love and long-suffering. We say to the brother within us, Raka, and condemn and rage against ourselves. We hide him from the world. We deny ever having met this least among the lowly in ourselves, and had it been God himself who drew near to us in this despicable form, we should have denied him 1,000 times before a single cock had crowed. Well, you may think the metaphors rather strong, but I feel that they are not so needlessly. This is a very, very forceful passage, and a memorable one in all Jung's works, trying to heal this insanity from which our culture in particular has suffered, of thinking that a human being can become hale, healthy, and holy by being divided against himself in inner conflict, paralleling the conception of a cosmic conflict between an absolute good and an absolute evil, which cannot be reduced to any prior and underlying unity. In other words, our rage, and our very proper rage, against evil things which occur in this world, must not overstep itself. For if we require as a justification for our rage a fundamental and metaphysical division between good and evil, we have an insane and in a certain sense schizophrenic universe, of which no sense whatsoever can be made. All conflict, Jung was saying, all opposition has its resolution in an underlying unity. You cannot understand the meaning of to be unless you understand the meaning of not to be. You cannot understand the meaning of good unless you understand the meaning of evil. Even St. Thomas Aquinas saw this, for he said, "The justice is the silent pause which gives sweetness to the chant. So it is suffering, and so it is evil, which makes possible the recognition of virtue." This is not, as Jung tries to explain, a philosophy of condoning the evil. To take the opposite position, he said, and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use, but estranges him, the doctor, or estranges him, the patient, as much as condemnation. Let me continue further, reading from this extraordinary passage. Healing may be called, Jung says, a religious problem. In the sphere of social or national relations, the state of suffering may be civil war, and this state is to be cured by the Christian virtue of forgiveness and love of one's enemies. That which we recommend with the conviction of good Christians as applicable to external situations, we must also apply inwardly in the treatment of neurosis. This is why modern man has heard enough about guilt and sin. He is sorely beset by his own bad conscience, and wants rather to know how he is to reconcile himself with his own nature, how he is to love the enemy in his own heart, and call the wolf his brother. The modern man does not want to know in what way he can imitate Christ, but in what way he can live his own individual life, however meager and uninteresting it may be. It is because every form of imitation seems to him deadening and sterile that he rebels against the force of tradition that would hold him to well-trodden ways. All such roads for him lead in the wrong direction. He may not know it, but he behaves as if his own individual life were God's special will which must be fulfilled at all costs. This is the source of his egoism, which is one of the most tangible evils of the neurotic state. But the person who tells him he is too egoistic has already lost his confidence, and rightly so, for that person has driven him still further into his neurosis. If I wish to effect a cure for my patients, I am forced to acknowledge the deep significance of their egoism. I should be blind indeed if I did not recognize it as a true will of God. I must even help the patient to prevail in his egoism. If he succeeds in this, he estranges himself from other people. He drives them away, and they come to themselves as they should, for they were seeking to rob him of his sacred egoism. This must be left to him, for it is his strongest and healthiest power. It is, as I have said, a true will of God, which sometimes drives him into complete isolation. However wretched this state may be, it also stands him in good stead. For in this way alone can he get to know himself and learn what an invaluable treasure is the love of his fellow beings. It is, moreover, only in the state of complete abandonment and loneliness that we experience the helpful powers of our own natures. End of quote. This is a very striking example of Jung's power to comprehend and integrate points of view as well as psychological attitudes that seem on the surface to be completely antithetical. For example, even in his own work, when he was devoting himself to the study of Eastern philosophy, he had some difficulty in comprehending the, let's say, the Buddhistic denial of the reality of the ego. But you can see that in practice, in what he was actually trying to get at, he was moving towards the same position that is intended in both the Hindu and the Buddhist philosophy about the nature of the ego. Just for example, as the Hindu will say, that the I principle in man is not really a separate ego, but an expression of the universal life of Brahman, or the Godhead. So Jung is saying here that the development of the ego in man is a true will of God, and that it is only by following the ego that one, and developing it to its full extent, that one fulfills the function which this, you might say, temporary illusion has in man's psychic life. For he goes on and says here, when one has several times seen this development at work, one can no longer deny that what was evil has turned to good, and that what seemed good has kept alive the forces of evil. The archdemon of egoism leads us along the royal road to that ingathering which religious experience demands. What we observe here is a fundamental law of life, enantiodromia, or conversion into the opposite. And it is this that makes possible the reunion of the warring halves of the personality, and thereby brings the civil war to an end. End of quote. In other words, he was seeing that, as Blake said, a fool who persists in his folly will become wise. That the development of egoism in man is not something to be overcome or better integrated by opposition to it, but by following it. It's almost, isn't it, the principle of judo, not overcoming what appears to be a hostile force by opposing it, but by swinging with the punch or rolling with the punch. And so by following the ego transcends itself. And in this moment of insight, the great Westerner, who comes out of a whole tradition of human personality which centers it upon the ego, upon individual separateness, by going along consistently with this principle, comes to the same position as the Easterner. That is to say, to the point of view where one sees conflict, which at first sight had seemed absolute, as resting upon a primordial unity, thereby attaining a profound, unshakable peace of the heart, which can nevertheless contain conflict. Not a peace that is simply static and lightless, but a peace that passes understanding.
Halftime or something? What is this? I think it is. I'll be right back. Give me a second. Sheesh. That wasn't halftime. That was the end of the motherfucking first quarter. Damn.
If prostitution was legal, do you think we'd have a better society?
Yes.
Why?
Because you ain't got to be worried about the police coming after you if you want to buy some pussy.
The men that come to Las Vegas and they think every woman prostitute. You know, if you're out here in your dress, you're prostitute. So they treat you like trash. They talk to you like trash. They tell you trashy stuff because automatically you're a prostitute. So absolutely not, no, it wouldn't.
I actually think it would solve a lot of society's problems.
Hey.
I know that sounds absolutely insane, but I do think it would be solving a lot of society's problems. It would be solving so much sex trafficking, male trafficking, child trafficking, like so much things would actually be solved if this actually got legalized.
Personally, do I want to do it? I mean, no. But does it bring down the price? Does it bring down the value? It does. And it brings down the value on other women. And that's the problem. You know, that's a solution. But like with us, it's like as men, we pay too much. We go through too much, and it's the truth.
Why is porn legal but prostitution isn't?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, what's the difference between being paid for sex and being paid for sex in front of a camera?
Some way,
Right.
some company can own it, own the rights, and stream it the right way, and be able to, you know.
Why is it okay for you to be a porn star, but it's not okay for you to be a prostitute? I don't get that. Honestly, I don't.
If prostitution was legal, what do you think would happen to OnlyFans?
It would go down the drain. People would, we wouldn't want to pay to see it if we could go get the real thing.
Do you believe that lonely, sexless
Right.
men are more likely to be violent, and if so, why?
Yes, because they got a lot of pressure built up.
Them the most calmest ones. They sitting in the crib, playing their
Right,
video
for
games,
real.
beating their meat, eating their Cheetos, you know, just kicking it, being fat, cool guys at the crib, you know.
That's funny.
I'm just saying, I can't judge nobody, you feel me? Because, hey, I probably was that at one time, you know.
So if prostitution was cheap and accessible, do you think there would be less sexual violence?
Yes.
If so, would you be in support of making that possible despite the fact that it objectifies women?
No.
Why?
Because,
Don't you want to live in a safer society?
yeah. But I wouldn't do it, but I mean, everybody can do their own thing, whatever.
I'm not saying you have to do it, but I'm just saying, why wouldn't you just support it being an option for men?
Most women don't like being considered prostitutes, so I think the labels kind of turn women off.
You have a lot of tension built up that you need to release sexually, you know, and if you don't have a partner for that, or at least access to, you know, some kind of open sexual relationship you can get into, then you're going to be probably more hostile and on edge, I believe.
So if prostitution was cheap and accessible, do you think there would be less sexual violence?
I do. Less sexual violence? Absolutely, 100%.
If so, would you be in support of making that possible despite the fact that it objectifies women?
I think that even if it was legal, it would still be their choice, so I don't think it objectifies women.
Hoflation is a term which describes the increase in price men have to pay for lower value women. Men have more competition than ever, women have more options than ever. In essence, dating has now become a luxury commodity, and the only option is for men to step their game up. Why should men be expected to bring more to the table than they ever have in order to please women who bring less to the table than they ever have?
Because that's just how it is. I don't know. Men are supposed to be providers. If they have to bring more to the table, it's just because that's the society we live in today. Things cost more nowadays.
And how's that working out for us?
Barely.
Why should men be expected to bring more to the table than they ever have in order to please women who bring less to the table than they ever have?
We shouldn't have to. I think women need to start lowering their standards and men need to start raising their standards, or we're just going to be sitting there. It's going to be a horrible society.
If most men are average and women's standards are delusional, why isn't prostitution a more practical solution than telling men to all become high value?
Well, I mean, I think that is what, like, if you're a low-value man and that's what you got to do, then yeah, I would, then, you know, resort to prostitution. But I feel like every man personally, you should work on yourself, you know, value yourself first, and then, you know, once you start chasing yourself, the women are going to chase you.
If legalizing prostitution would be a game changer, why is it never talked about on any of these podcasts?
We talking about it now.
It's like everybody like it, but ain't nobody gonna talk about it.
Because they look at prostitutes as disgusting, horrible women, and they think of us as the very bare minimum. If you're a prostitute, you don't have nothing to offer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe people just scared of the subject. They probably not ready for it yet.
Could it be because they're pushing their own conservative agenda?
Yes.
These guys, they push their conservatism agenda so much. Like Andrew Tate, for instance, you know what I mean? He pushes that shit, he pushes it all the way. And when you do it all the way, you kind of got to, you know, disagree with prostitution being illegal because that's a libertarian, that's a liberal thing.
Do you think the solution could be prostitution, the world's oldest institution?
I think that you should have the right to do with what you want with your body, whether that's prostitution, you know, abortion, whatever it is. I think that, you know, to a certain extent, you should have, as long as it doesn't harm other human beings, then you should have.
You just said abortion.
Rights to do whatever you want with your body.
Why is my body, my choice acceptable when it comes to abortion, but not when it comes to prostitution, the draft, or vaccine mandates?
Right. That's
control, man. Just control. You know, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but you know, like, there's a deeper purpose behind things. You know, they try to get us to fall in line, you know, at least to some extent, if it's going to line their pockets. And if it's not lining their agenda and it's not lining their pockets, then they're not going to back it, you know. And eventually one day when they can figure out a way for it to line their pockets, you know, it will be legal, you know, and they'll all act like they never were against it.
Wouldn't it end simping and shift the sexual marketplace to where women would have to compete for the men?
Yes, it would actually. It would very much so, because it would make it more accessible for men to get what they need.
I don't know if it would end simping, but it would shift the marketplace.
You know, in some areas where you got like a lot of prostitutes on the corner, they kind of be, you know, in competition for the next big baller and all of that. So it's already kind of women in competition.
Why should men pay for the opportunity to maybe get sex instead of just paying for sex?
Why not just pay for the sex? Why get a maybe?
If you really love this woman, if you really like this woman, this is really what you want, I think you should, you know, put the money into it and put the time into it. However, if it's just meaningless sex, or if it's just, you know, a conversation and it leads to sex, and whatever, you end up buying drinks and shit, I mean, it ain't worth it.
Wouldn't relationships be built on love rather than sex and manipulation?
Yes, relationships should be built on love and respect. 100%.
It revolves around manipulation. We read books. Men read books. Neil Strauss. You know, all these books about game, in the sense that we're trying to gain game and manipulate women to have sex, when in reality we don't even want the love. We just want the sex. But it results in women falling in love because we're giving them the illusion of love. And then when we do that, you know, we don't really want love. And then when women really want love, all we have is sex for them. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of like a backwards game. It's crazy.
Wouldn't men be more fulfilled and less angry and violent?
Yeah, actually, it would limit so much emotional and actual physical abuse.
If you're depending on sex to make you feel better or another person or anything, then that just shows that, you know, you're not working on your spirit.
Wouldn't men be less pitted against each other to compete for women?
Yes, there is so much war between men trying to get the same girl. It's insane.
Trying to get the same
The
girl.
competition, like I said, it'll equal out the playing field. You know what I mean?
It's funny.
So like, we have the 1% and we have us. I'm not 1%. I'm not a multi-millionaire in the bank.
Hold on.
I work on things and I do work hard, and I'm probably more than the average man, but you know
and
what?
then we got us.
Wouldn't men be less pitted against each other to compete for women?
Yes, there is so much war between men trying to get the same girl. It's insane.
The competition, like I said, it'll equal out the playing field. You know what I mean? So like, we have the 1% and we have us. I'm not 1%. I'm not a multi-millionaire in the bank. I work on things and I do work hard, and I'm probably more than the average man, but you know what? Like, it would equal out the playing field. It would make it fair for all of us to play the same game.
Wouldn't it flood the market and drive down prices?
Yeah, actually it would. It would. It would eliminate so much stuff like the black market.
Hoflation, right? Hoflation?
Hoflation.
So hoflation, you know, it would bring down the price. Supply and demand. It's a simple economics, you know, idea. So, yeah, of course.
We have the black market, sex trafficking, all genders, all ages now. Like, it's actually even scarier now. Before it was safer. You had security guards, you had people protecting you. You had people making sure everything was going about the right way and the safe way.
Can you think of any reasons not to legalize it?
Really, no, I can't.
I think it's a drug. And I think the more you do the drug, the more you're gonna be into it, the more you're gonna be okay with it. And it creates a problem in certain people. If you have like an addictive personality or whatever, like, you're gonna keep doing it, and you know, it might be a problem with your wife. You know, if you're having sex with hookers and you have a wife, I think that's a problem. Don't do that to your wife, bro.
What are your thoughts on the expression, every man pays for sex?
I agree.
You're going on a date and you have to spend your money for her to like you more. Some people don't do that. I got guys that don't do nothing for no females. Nothing. You hear me? And they still giving that cat up.
Well, we all pay for sex. And if it's not money, it's investment. Or you know what it is? It's me working as hard as I can to be able to provide for a woman. You know, just to be able to be the best person I can be so she can keep around, you know, stay with me. Or be able to like not run away with my kids and be like, hey, this is a good man, I can stay with him. And if it's not, you know, paying for it, like, you know, with actual, like, hey, me swiping a card, it's me working in the gym, it's me working 2 jobs, it's me working 3 jobs, it's me working my ass off just so I can, you know, maintain a family.
Every woman pays for sex in a way too. You could that expression could go both ways. Whether it's not money, it could not be money, but you know, I mean, at the end of the day, when they go to bed and at night and they slept with 10 men this week, you know, it's like it's a lot more degrading for them. They probably feel that a lot more than I would if I banged 10 chicks this week. That's just being honest, you know.
That's fine.
Is it generally true that men seek the hottest woman they can afford, while women seek the richest man they can attract?
Yes.
Don't men want trophy wives and women want sugar daddies?
Yes.
So how is dating not already just a loose form of prostitution?
It is a loose form of prostitution.
So then why would we not just legalize it?
Got me. Got a good point.
It's a loose form of prostitution. Maybe it is, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Why is it often said that prostitution is the world's oldest profession?
Because women been exchanging sex for goods since the beginning of time.
Because it is actually. It used to be legalized. It used to be okay. It's actually, I'm pretty sure, okay in some other states and countries.
I'm not big in the Bible, but you know, I'm not very religious. But the Bible was what I grew up on, and they told me that was the first job ever created. Because men have a need. And when they have a need, they'll pay for it. So if there's one need that we all have, we fight wars for, we work jobs for, it's for sex. To be real, you know.
Or maybe resources.
Nah, man, it'd be sex.
Resources to get sex.
Right. That's what I mean. Like, you make money to get sex, bro. Like, that's how it goes. You fight wars, you do these things to get sex. And, you know, pussy is the most important thing to a man. And I'm gonna be real with you. It might be your kids, but at the end of the day, you wouldn't have no kids if it wasn't for that one thing.
If men have always been in power, why would a man make the law that prostitution should be illegal?
I don't know, maybe they were manipulated by a woman. Maybe they were told that it was wrong. But if you really think about it and you really think about the points and the keys here, is it really wrong?
If men have always been in power, why would a man make the law that prostitution should be illegal?
Well, I feel like men want to make other men weaker to make things easier for them.
Why is my body, my choice acceptable when it comes to abortion, but not when it comes to prostitution, the draft, or vaccine mandates?
Because society has deemed women in control, and it seems like they're making these rules up as they go.
Right? It's probably the best answer I heard the whole time. They're making this arbitrary bullshit up as they go, man. Nah, they know what they're doing. Order out of chaos, you dig? Ooh. I left him right there. Motherfucker gonna dribble the ball the whole time or what? Why you miss, nigga? Come on, bro. Pass the ball. Inflation. The pussy price going up. Bitch. Hold up.
This after-school presentation was written and recorded by Eternalized. Swiss psychiatrist and psychologist Carl Gustav Jung is the founder of analytical psychology and revolutionized the field with his in-depth exploration of the unconscious. Through his confrontation with the unconscious, he explored the dark side of human nature, while many denied it and focused solely on the light side. It is a fact that we all go through dark times, as we're gradually assaulted and overcome by the trials and tribulations of life. Jung writes, "It is high time we realized that it is pointless to praise the light and preach it if nobody can see it. It is much more needful to teach people the art of seeing." It is becoming increasingly more common to display only the pleasant parts and highlights of our lives. This one-sidedness creates an artificial view of life in which our dark side is buried and considered taboo in society. and as we see other people with their seemingly amazing lives, we become even more resentful and disappointed with ourselves. We see our behavior as socially unacceptable and try to conceal our emotions and contradict our real self. This forms the persona, a false social mask that makes us appear more likable to others to the detriment of our mental stability, and which ends up negatively affecting our whole life. We unconsciously let other people live our life for us, and we become inauthentic, mere numbers in the crowd. It is impossible to progress towards self-realization if we are presenting ourselves as someone different to who we really are. When we realize that we have been living a lie, the false mask shatters, and we come face to face with the emptiness of ourself, which may result in an existential crisis. Authenticity opens the path towards self-realization. With a radically honest view of life, we can progress towards psychic wholeness by acknowledging our dark side that most people cannot bear to look at. We mustn't repress our darkness, but rather confront it. Nobody is perfect, and taking responsibility to acknowledge this can bring relief to others and a feeling that they are not alone. Jung writes, "There's no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. To round itself out, life calls not for perfection but for completeness, and for this the thorn in the flesh is needed, the suffering of defects without which there's no progress and no ascent." One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The persona, as well as all our defects, insecurities, repressions, and memories long avoided, feed and form our shadow, the unknown dark side of our personality. The shadow is everything which one has no wish to be. It follows us around all our life, both literally and metaphorically. We may try to ignore it consciously, but it will always form a part of our unconscious personality. It is not some detached thing that can be avoided. It is a part of you. To go against the shadow means to go against yourself. We are all capable of good and evil. That is the only reality. It is important to know how much good we can do and what crimes we are capable of. And knowing this, choose not to do evil. That is the true moral position. The shadow is commonly mistaken as an enemy or evil entity. However, it is really exactly like any human being, who sometimes resists or sometimes gives love, whatever the situation requires. The shadow becomes hostile only when it is ignored or misunderstood. A frequent nightmare consists in being chased or confronted by a scary monster or shadowy figure. But when one confronts the figure and questions it, it starts to take on an amiable appearance. To honor and accept our shadow is a profound spiritual discipline. The shadow of an aggressive person contains tenderness, relatedness, and sincerity, while the shadow of a shy person would be assertive, responsible, and confident. It has a compensatory role and represents everything that we lack. The shadow contains pure gold as psychological insight, waiting to be integrated into our personality. This inner gold is all our potential and ideal self, which we all look up to in life and strive to become. And for that reason, the shadow is our ally in the journey of life. The less we acknowledge our shadow, the more it is liable to burst forth suddenly in a moment of unawareness. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. In the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Jekyll tries to repress his dark side, but instead ends up giving life to his shadow, Hyde, who takes control over him as an autonomous personality and performs evil acts against his will. The dissociation takes on the form of a physical change, rather than, as in reality, an inner psychic state. It must be us who integrates our shadow and not the other way around. We talk about being able to control ourselves, but self-control is a rare and remarkable virtue. The result of ignoring our shadow is psychological projection. where we unconsciously attribute our own unacceptable thoughts and feelings to other people. Projection is always easier than assimilation. By pointing our finger to other people, we reduce the discomfort and anxiety about ourselves and avoid taking responsibility to admit that we are in the wrong. Our world takes on an illusory existence, and what is being spun is a cocoon, which in the end will completely envelop us. This can also negatively affect the relationships we have with our friends or loved ones, which we often take for granted. We do not value what we have until we lose it, and once we do, the whole world takes on a dark appearance, and we fall into a depression, filled with sadness, self-hatred, and regret. Projection can also appear collectively when people think it is they who are wrong and they who must be fought against. The tendency to see one's shadow out there in a specific person or a group of people is the most dangerous aspect of the modern psyche. The collective shadow ultimately leads to war, economic chaos, strikes, racial intolerance, and more. The scariest part is that people are entirely unaware of being immersed in it. Our good qualities remain dormant until we acknowledge the existence of our personal shadow. All our energy lies in our shadow, and ignoring it makes us feel lifeless, exhausted, and lazy. A confrontation with one's shadow fills one up with energy and stamina, which we can use for our daily tasks and work. This can be done through shadow work, the practice which includes self-awareness, watching one's emotional reactions, being radically honest, and paying attention to one's dreams. The paradox of human existence is that to experience the light and true happiness, we must descend into the dark. The true source of light is that which endures and continues to burn in the depths of the darkness. The figure of the wounded healer is one who is at home in the darkness of suffering and finds light and recovery, a sort of creative depression which is the cry of the soul for growth. We should not try to cure it, because it cures us. We should experience what it means, what it has to teach, and what its purpose is. This shamanic figure has learned to cure himself and find the gold in his shadow, and bring the wisdom to his people. We stop fearing the darkness once we know the phoenix in us will rise from the ashes, for only that which can destroy itself is truly alive. By becoming our authentic self and integrating our dark side, we can also become consciously aware of the collective shadow and not fall prey to it. This allows us to positively influence other people to do the same, improve our lives and the lives of those around us. People often ask Jung, "Will we make it?" referring to the cataclysm of our time. He always replied, "If enough people will do their inner work." Jung provides us with ways to explore the unconscious and achieve a better understanding of ourselves, the world, and other people. He tells us that we must have a dark side if we are to be whole. By denying the darkness, we are denying half of ourselves. The place where light and dark begin to touch is the most profound experience we can have in life. It is the union of opposites that gives rise to the self, the totality of our personality, and the main goal of human psychological development. The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. If you're interested in learning more about the works of Jung, head over to my channel.
Yeah, I already got other shit. Hold on, let me see real quick. Well, made it. Play this shit real quick. What did I do? Did I do something? Did I? I did. 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 I d All right, let me just turn that shit off because I know.
Remember, you're always allowed to think whatever you want. This is all information and all based on my research. Breakfast is known as the most important meal of the day. Nutrition experts in public schools also say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, when you dig deeper, as we do here, we begin to learn the incredible health benefits of fasting. How your body does not need to be digesting food all day long. Why would they want to break your fast so bad and put it right in your face? And you don't even see it until possibly now and call it the most important meal of the day. Breakfast. Break fast. How can this kind of stuff be right in our faces? And what else is in our everyday life? Just hanging right in front of our face that we don't see. And also, everyone understands that fire can't burn stone, right? This is why people put stone around campfires, and stone buildings never burn to the ground. Since this is episode 40, I had to do something cool. So we will definitely get to that later on in this episode. Welcome to episode 40 of my lunch break. I hope you're all having a great day. And if you're new, welcome. Jason Brunson, Maddie Kevs, Christopher Arrieta, Millicent. The Tennessee State Capitol was constructed in 1859, so they say, and looked really lonely on the hill. Like it's been sitting there a lot longer than we're told. And in 1859, they had cars? No. So why are they trying to tell us that this is the construction photo? Was that from the horse and the wagon? How ridiculous does that sound? And who built this place? Which construction company was trained? And how many men in 1859? Wait, what is this? Convicts and slave laborers were used in the project. Are you kidding me? I need to build a stone capitol that is built in the Greek revival style, and it must last forever. Who should I hire? Your average slave or convict. Should be perfect for the job, of course, with zero formal training. And who cares what their work ethic is? They will also receive $0 in return for their work, which means they will fully focus down to the perfect detail. What is going on here? This is what we are actually told. I'm turning it into a joke, but it's actually written here. It cost nearly $30 million. So they trusted these convicts with a $30 million project. Yeah, right. And let's all not forget that the prisoners could put interior columns built from a single piece of stone together in 1859 very easily. Of course they can. And it is built on this hill. From what I've seen in the past, things that are built on a hill like this are usually hiding something underground. How much bigger is this building than what we can see? So Strickland was the architect. And here is a fake picture of him, of course. He looks like the brother of the guy from Austin Powers. Well, Strickland ends up dying before the project is over, of course, as we've seen so many times before in these narratives. But they don't bring in another master architect from a faraway land, like we're always told. No, they just bring in his son, who can easily slide right in and finish up the $30 million project very easily. This kind of architect musical chairs only worked in the 1800s, of course. During no other time period ever in the history of time would a child be able to come in and complete a massive state capitol building project if we are using common sense. But the 1800s were filled with people that understood construction. Without any professional education, it was just embedded in their DNA. But once 1900 hit, this was no longer the case and children actually had to learn. What a joke. I cannot believe they are saying that this kid hops in and gets the job done. It's insane. It's crazy. So they have a son and some slaves and prisoners working on this place. $30 million bucks, and of course it'll be completed with perfection. And thank you for telling us 2 other buildings that are from the old world. I appreciate it. Staying in Tennessee for today, we have the Hermitage, located in Nashville, Tennessee. This one was constructed in 1835. And what is going on here? We have a house built on the side of these columns. This is so weird. I can't wait to hear what they say about this place. Okay, so this is where Andrew Jackson, the $20 bill guy, this is where he lived. So he gets this old world building, of course, in the early 1800s. This honestly just looks so weird to me, just looking at it. Like they found columns sticking out of the ground and had to disguise it with a random house. Am I the only one seeing this? This is crazy. And let's keep reading, and there it is. We got it. In 1834, a chimney fire seriously damaged the house. So we get the nod that this is from the old world. It is fun when you know the symbolism. It makes reading these stories way more entertaining. Let's continue. So here we are in the backyard of this place. And this is kind of what I was taught about the 1800s, that people were living in log cabin houses like this, freezing in winters and suffering with horses and wagons. I was definitely not taught that slaves and prisoners and children of architects with horses and wagons and no power tools, literally zero experience or training all over the world, could have easily just built massive cathedral-like buildings, star forts and the rest, for everyone to have in like 8 months or less. This would have made things much better and easier for everyone. Life in the 1800s actually wouldn't have been that bad. But nobody is doing this today. And there's not one excuse in the book that would explain this. No, it is not because of coding. If the coding conduct allowed for prisoners to work on buildings today, they would not be able to recreate the Cologne Cathedral or the St. Mark's Basilica in 4 years, which only took 4 years supposedly in the year 828 to 832, 1,191 years ago, before anyone knew how to make paper. So these narratives are colliding. This is where we come in, with a much more logical explanation that there was a previous civilization that actually had construction training, that actually had tools, that actually had the experience, and understood all of this all over the world. And now they are gone and have left their buildings behind for us to see. Now, as I promised earlier, here we are at 220 Washington Avenue in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. For anyone that is new, we have the Tartarian flag, which contains a griffin. So what is going on here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, on a life insurance building? Why do we have 4 columns? And why are there 10 griffin symbols covering the front of this building? And why has nobody ever questioned this? This is unbelievable. Not only are there griffins staring at us right in our faces, but we even have the color yellow, the exact color that is on their flag. This is not a coincidence. This is the old world, right in our faces. The Wisconsin National Life Insurance Company was created in 1908 as the first legal reserve stock life insurance company in Wisconsin. So of course this insurance company would get the rights to an old world building. I'm going to say this is all my opinion, but how much clearer could it get? We are here physically looking at this, and having it all match up is incredible. Oh, and if there is any questions, whether these are griffins or not, and if you may think I'm possibly making this up, let's make sure this is extremely clear. Here we are, on the Wisconsin Historical Society website. Let's scroll down into the notes section on this building. And in their own words, they tell us that these are, in fact, griffins. All for a life insurance building, of course. This is powerful stuff, proving that Grand Tartaria was most likely worldwide. It's incredible. Oh, and we are told that Aller and Jensen were the architects of this incredible building with insane detail. The only problem with that is that this group was not master architects, only designing 2 other average projects in their entire lifetime of existence. Using common sense, anyone designing a building like this life insurance building would have been doing this kind of work at least 3 more times in their life. I really hope you all enjoyed this boots on the ground work. If you did, please give this video a like. Oh, wait, and do we all see what is right next door to this building? And why do they have windows underground? Exactly how we have shown in previous episodes, such as Ancient Champagne, episode 36. This is no coincidence. This is incredible. We all know who found these buildings. It's right on the front of their building. Unbelievable. This whole town was from a past civilization, in my opinion. Each building was worthy of its own episode. I walked around Oshkosh for about an hour, just in shock of what I was seeing. It's incredible the people that live in these towns are unaware of what structures are sitting right in front of them. These people were looking at me and my crew videoing these buildings, and they're so confused what I'm looking at. It is strange knowing this information sometimes, like you're living in a different world than everyone else. This whole town had clear signs of being filled up with dirt. These buildings are much bigger than we can see, with windows underground on most of these buildings, proving this. And then this library that goes about 20 feet below our new ground level. How religious could a small town like this have been 200 years ago? That they need 5 to 10 churches right next to each other. That isn't logical thinking. These buildings were not all used for religious purposes, and we have explained this in previous episodes. These churches were most likely generating natural free energy for the community. Would you be shocked if they still do? But we just don't understand how to turn them back on? The detail on this life insurance building is incredible. Everywhere from the symbolic owls, the detail in the stonework, and of course the griffins. I actually can't believe that they allowed this building to stay here in our site. If I was in charge of the reset, I think the building with the griffins around the entire top of the building would have been the first one to go. But I'm very glad that they left it here for us to see. I just stood there looking at this place for a while. It was really cool to see it. I felt like I was back in the old world. I tried to get in, but it was locked, of course. I took a video through the glass door, and you can see that it goes deeper into the ground. If any of you are ever in the area to see Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I definitely suggest spending some time there and checking it out and seeing all of these buildings from the old world. Griffins on the top of the building, just incredible. And then you have the building right next door, which we all know about. Once you know the truth, you know. You don't go back to not knowing. This was a lot of fun, and I have another trip planned very soon. I have an experiment that involves a flamethrower that I really want to do for you guys. Maybe we can come up with...
He's like, I got an experiment now. He wants to do experiments and shit. Oh man, come on, bro. That's crazy. Oh man, homie. Holy shit, what was that? Damn. Damn. Come on, bro. Can't make shit right now. Losing this game. Okay, I ain't tripping. Come on, bro. I can't make nothing right now.
The life of Madame Blavatsky is rather too well known to require an elaborate discussion at this time. Rather, it seems more profitable to attempt to integrate her place in the descent of what might be termed esoteric philosophy in the West. For practical purposes, Orientalism as a philosophical factor in the thinking of Western man first came into focus in the closing years of the 18th century. Prior to that time, East and West were so far apart, and Western religious dogmatism was so intense that there was little, if any, cultural interchange. Thus, for a very long time, nearly 2,000 years, Western culture attempted to maintain a complete isolation, refusing to admit its indebtedness to great Asiatic systems which were old before Western civilization was born. Colonel Robert Ingersoll remarked on one occasion that the Chinese were compiling great libraries, indexing them, classifying them, and researching in them, while Western European man was still mumbling the bones of animals in prehistoric caves. And this, perhaps slightly exaggerated, is not very far from the truth. In the early years of the 19th century, there was a decided break in Western orthodoxy. The rather conservative and inadequate literalism of Protestant Christianity was being assailed by a need within man himself. He was not getting the spiritual nutrition that he required for a well-integrated religious life. So we find that as early as Ralph Waldo Emerson, efforts were made to enlarge and enrich the schools of Western tradition. The universities were still more or less closed to all liberal religious thinking. If today they are inclined to be brittly agnostic, at that time they were adamantly orthodox. Nearly all chairs of philosophy were occupied by doctors of divinity, and what has been called the school of Scottish metaphysicians dominated the educational world. There were no breaks as yet in favor of liberalism in higher education, but individuals like Emerson began to recognize that beyond the sea, on the other side of the world, some interesting thoughts had come to the world. The great scriptures had been written, wonderful classics had been compiled, great teachers had arisen, and that a rich legacy of spiritual tradition was completely locked from us simply by the narrowness of our own thinking. As a result of some moderate reading in not too substantial authorities, Emerson was able to sense some of the grandeur of Eastern thinking, and he has revealed this to us through his essays on the Oversoul and his essay on compensation. He knew the Bhagavad Gita, one of the greatest mystical books of Asia. He was aware that in this distant area There was a deep, quiet, calm wisdom.
Another foul.
Which might be rather practical and useful in the confusion of the Western world. In any event, let us realize that between about 1825 and 1850, there was a broad rise of mysticism and esotericism and transcendentalism in the eastern part of the United States. And as the time went on, that happened which almost always happens under such conditions. There was an almost frantic searching for more of this unusual information. The result was more or less pathetic. The necessary texts were not available. There were practically no translations from Eastern languages, and very few Western scholars who had any knowledge of Asiatic tongues. There was no break in this wall between East and West, and only an occasional fragment drifted into our Western comprehension. It was as a result of the unrest,
hey y'all, I'm gonna holler at y'all later, man.
Stimulation of the
this shit
unknown.
another time.
The sudden sensing of value out of reach that the